Welcome viewers to another edition of Focus on Africans. Today we are in The Hague of the Netherlands, and luckily the ambassador of Rwanda has agreed to talk to us today. So let me welcome Ambassador Immaculée Mwailegira to Focus on Africans. Welcome back. Welcome to Focus on Africans. And we begin by thanking you for welcoming us to your embassy. Focus on Africa is a program where we try to share ideas about our continent. And we are grateful and glad to have you on board this morning. We start the program by asking you to tell us something about yourself. Who is Ambassador Immaculée?
What you see is what you get.
What you see is what you get. That's a good one.
I'm from Rwanda, naturally.
Okay.
And I studied in Rwanda until my elementary school.
Okay.
I went to study in Uganda. After that, I went to live in Uganda.
Okay.
I did my secondary school, part of my elementary school, secondary school in Uganda, as well as tertiary education. At the time, there was only Makerere University. And I left. I lived in the Caribbean for 7 years after that.
The Caribbean?
Yes, in Trinidad and Tobago.
Oh. There's a saying that diplomats are people who are sent out to live for their countries.
Not at all. I have no lies. I don't have such instructions, and I have no lies at all in my repertoire.
Okay, we have to look at diplomacy in a different light then.
Yes, I think that we need to overhaul diplomacy if that's what it's been known to do.
So,
surely not in this house, no.
All right, thank you. You told us about the role of Belgium in the tragedy of your country. But mostly France is also mentioned. Why did the French come in? Or when did they come in?
The French, are you talking about in 1994?
Yeah, 1994.
Specifically, I can talk to 1994, the inaction of the international community. At the height of, even in the planning stages of the genocide had occurred, even as early as the 1990s. The setting ground, or the staging ground, was already occurring from the early 90s.
And the French position, why did they come in?
Well, in 1990, October 90, when the RPF took arms, you have to understand that the RPF was comprised of the offsprings of the various Rwandans who had left the country from 1959, from early in the 1960s, people who kept periodically being killed off, and others fleeing into neighboring countries. And also in 1973, there was another huge massacre in 1982. So periodically, Rwanda would try to kill off its Tutsi population. And the 1990 invasion, so to speak, of the RPF was a decision that was taken after Rwanda had failed to come to terms with the return of the refugees that were now mushrooming across the neighboring countries. Okay. So in 1990, Rwanda called upon, the government of Rwanda at the time called upon its friends to assist what? The rebellion or the invasion from the RPF. But really, for people who are outside of the country, we didn't see this as an invasion. We saw it as a liberation war to regain our mother country that we had been deprived of for 30 years.
And
some for less.
So
the French, of course, they didn't put boots on the ground, but they provided technical support and I'm sure material to the Rwandan government, as well as the Belgians and also the Congolese. Congolese put boots on the ground. But the French involvement in Rwanda was not only in 1990s. There had been a good friendship for a long while between the Rwandan government and the French authorities. And I think that the Belgian forced colony or colonization of Rwanda, somewhere along the lines also the French had found their way into Rwanda as well. But in something very key that you need to understand, that your viewers need to understand, is the actual participation in the genocide by the French troops.
French troops?
Yes. The UN refused to act when in January 94, General Dallaire, who was the force commander, Canadian force commander of the peacekeeping mission in Rwanda, sent a fax to New York. That fax was a fax that informed New York of an informant, a Rwandan government informant, who had intimated to Dallaire that there was a machinery that his government was putting in place that could kill 6 people per minute. And he did not want to be part of it, but he availed this information to Dallaire. Dallaire availed the information to the UN and asked that he be allowed to raid these arms caches that they had across the country that they would release into the general population or to the militia they had trained. He asked for a reinforcement of what he had then was 2,500 thereabouts. He asked for a similar number of troops in order for him to avert a disaster. They refused on both counts. They refused. So the genocide occurred and was very swiftly. In fact, almost close to the figure per minute that the official had mentioned. And just about the government was being defeated because RPF, when they realized that they were killing off the population, and it was no longer a conventional fight between them. Of course, there was a ceasefire, but the RPF was still observing. The UN, in retrospect, realized that they had made a terrible error, and very little and very late decided to authorize the deployment of a reinforcement through and send the French in an operation called Opération Turquoise, or Turquoise Operation, that in fact assisted in exterminating the remainder of the people. Because
the French assisted them?
Well, their presence. Okay. It was too little, too late, and it was wrong. It was the wrong prescription to an ill-diagnosed problem.
Are you saying that the French did it deliberately?
Well, the French were allies of the former Rwandan government. So to interpose them between the approaching RPF and the defeated, fleeing Rwandan government only allowed a period which enabled the fleeing government to totally exterminate every Tutsi that was in the area where they were fleeing from, because at least some people could have been saved had the French not come. But also, more insidiously, the French participated. They were manning roadblocks at which they were people were being killed. And also they were witnesses, in fact victims, that have testified that they were raped by French soldiers. So their participation is well documented and well known.
Please, who is Jan Pronk? Can you tell us something about yourself?
Jan Pronk? I'm Dutch, and at the moment we are here at the Institute of Social Studies, which is a university institute only for students coming from developing countries. Not a big institute. We have about 400 students per annum, quite a number from Africa, and indeed also quite a number from Ghana.
Okay. Can we talk about your background? Why were you born?
Yeah, but I like to talk about today, not about yesterday. But I have a long background because I'm already 70 years old at the moment.
For the benefit of our viewers in Ghana.
Sure.
So where were you born?
Yes, I was born here in The Hague. As a matter of fact, it's Scheveningen, which is a seaside resort. And a fishing resort. My grandfather was a fisherman and my father was a teacher.
Okay. You used a very strong language on a former colleague of yours, Fadonk, when she was in charge of immigration. You call her policy deportation.
Yeah.
Why did you use such
well, people, we have quite a number of asylum seekers in Europe and in particular also in the Netherlands. And they come from countries such as I would say Iraq, Congo, and then at a certain moment the legal system says that their wish to seek asylum in our country is not justified. Very often it is justified, but they don't have the real document, they cannot prove it.
But you have to research deportation.
And then they're being brought back. And if sent back, in my view, if you're being sent back and being brought back to the same danger, which is a danger for life, yes, which you were fleeing from, I call that deportation. It is a, by the way, it is regular English. The word is being used in, but yeah, okay. But if you, some people who were being brought back, in particular to Congo, and the Secret Service was waiting for them, and you never heard anything back from these people anymore. I don't think it is ethical. So I called that deportation, and the minister was very
I agree with you. Another edition of Focus on Africans, the program where we talk about Africa and issues concerning the continent of Africa. We not only talk to Africans, but we talk to people also who have contact with Africa, who have connection with Africa, and whose policy have impact on Africa. Today we're at one of Europe's leading university, the Free University of Amsterdam. And luckily one of the professors there, and Professor of Economic Development, has agreed to talk with us. His name is Professor Yudi Schipper. And yeah, he has a lot of experience and contact with Africa, and is prepared to share them with us today. Please let me welcome Professor Schipper to Focus on Africans. Welcome.
Thank you.
So we begin this program by asking you to tell us something about yourself. Who is Yudi?
My name is Yudi Schipper, as you mentioned. The name Yudi is actually an African name. I received the name because my parents have lived in Africa when I was a really young kid. Between my year 0 and year 3, I was living in what is now called Congo. So at that time it was Zaire. And so at that time I was, at a very early age, I was in contact with Africa. But my full name is Jan Jeroen Yudi Schipper. And at some stage I decided that Yudi would be the name I use all the time. And the name Yudi is actually shortened from Ngu Yudi. And this was the name of a friend of my parents, somebody from Zaire. The name Yudi, or Ngu Yudi, means the man who asks a lot of questions. So that's what I try to do in my work.
So do you still have to ask a lot of questions? I
try to do that, yes, because as I'm an assistant professor at this university, and of course one of my jobs is to do research. And then when you do research, you ask a lot of ask questions.
So the name is very appropriate in your case.
Yes, you could say that.
But did your parents tell you why they chose to call you Yudi?
Well, yes, they had this good friend, and he was a very respected and loved person for my parents. So they are still in contact with him actually. So I hope to be able to meet him once when he's in Europe. But,
is he a sort of godfather to you?
Well, you could say that. Although I must admit we don't have a lot of contact because we are far apart. But it's interesting to say that he is actually trained as an econometrician. So he is very much
influenced on you.
Well, yes.
Really?
He knows my work. Although I think the choice I made, it's maybe more. It was not really guided by him, but it's nice that it's
sort
close.
Of like a guardian agent looking down somewhere.
That's right. Yes. Yes.
But you were actually born in Leiden.
That's true. Yes. Yes. So my parents at that time were in Holland for some time. I was born there, and then they went off again to Zaire. Yes.
Where did you grow up?
So I grew up for the first 3 years. I grew up in Zaire. So my parents lived in a number of places. One of them was Kinshasa. The other place was Lubumbashi, where we have stayed. Yes.
But you are too young to remember anything from it.
I must admit that my memory from that period is when I see pictures, it's more from photos.
Fragments,
yes.
But you came back to the Netherlands with your parents.
That's right.
What did you study?
At age 3. So then we stayed in a place called Utrecht, which is in the center of the Netherlands. It's it's the 4th big city of the Netherlands. Yes.
What do you remember from growing up in Utrecht?
Well, Utrecht is I'm always fond of that place. Even though I don't live there anymore, it's a nicely sized city with a very old history. At a very early age in the Netherlands, the Romans already lived in that place.
In Utrecht.
Utrecht, so it has a really long history. Very nice historic city center. I love the place. Of course, I did all my sports there, my school, and so on. So it's.
So you consider Utrecht your city?
Yes, I should say that, because when I went to Amsterdam after that, and of course, well, you know, Amsterdam is a place that many people know, and it's a really famous city. It's a really nice city as well.
Cosmopolitan also.
But it's larger than Utrecht.
Utrecht.
Yes.
And when you were growing up, what are the things you remember doing? As a child?
As a child? Well, that's a nice question. I remember, of course, traveling with my parents, but that was more in Utrecht. Although during that time, I think also my parents loved traveling, so they took us, me and my brother Gideon, they took us traveling once to Thailand, where friends of my family were living then, and once to Kenya, where friends were living.
How old were you then?
That was only like 4 weeks or 5 weeks.
How old were you when you went to Kenya?
I was 10 years
so
old.
You could remember something?
Yes.
Yeah, well, I would like to ask you, what was your impression of Africa?
Well, at that time, of course, that was impressive, because I was only 10 and I didn't remember much from Africa. There were actually a number of interesting things there. So we stayed in Nairobi, and then, of course, I remember the big elephant teeth there. Okay. And then we went also to a place called Mombasa at the coast. An interesting story there is that. Of course, my parents used to tell me things about Africa, and also about beliefs in Africa, about, let's say, that the powers that we cannot see, and the things that you have to take care of, and beliefs, and so on. Okay. And one of the things that I still remember very clearly from that trip was that we, on the way to Mombasa, the friends of my parents were in a separate car, and they hit an animal. I think it was a deer. So people told us you should go back, because this is like this is not good.
Bad luck.
This is bad luck. And then on the way back, of course, we had an accident with the two cars. So the car of my parents and the car of my friends, and nobody could explain what happened. Their brakes just failed or blocked, and so we hit them. It was not, it was not a very big, of course, as a child, it makes a big impression. Yeah. And nobody could explain why their brakes had suddenly blocked. How did your
parents interpret it?
Well, of course, there was a big discussion after. You can imagine.
African superstition or African science?
Well, one of the two. We don't know.
Okay.
And I think we would tend to look at it for, let's say, rationally and trying. But of course,
accident do happen. Yeah. On this positive note, I would say thank you very much, Ambassador.
Thank you.
It has been interesting talking with you, and thanks for sharing these ideas with us.
My pleasure.
Thank you very much. Yeah, the program is focused on Africans, and today we have had a very interesting discussion with Ambassador Immaculée Mwayigira at the Rwandan Embassy in The Hague. Yeah, my name is Femi Akomalafe. Until next week when we come your way, I say, Ireo.